Get her out. Immediately.
Brooke Anderson's voice was sharp as a whip. All the sponsors fell silent. A black girl in a cleaning uniform entered through the side door.
This is a stage for real artists.
Brooke's lips curled.
Not for some filthy maid who crawled in from the back door. She thinks she can sing. Nobody wants to hear her sing. Nobody wants to see her sing. It's an insult. I bet my name, my career, if she opens her mouth, every record. The only sound worth hearing is the door!
Nobody said anything. Chloe stood there, mop in hand, jaw clenched, calm, because what she did next wasn't about a bet. It shook an entire industry and made a pop star regret every word they said. Chloe Williams learned to sing before she learned to read. Her grandmother Elaine raised her in a 2-bedroom house in South Memphis, the kind of neighborhood where front porches sagged and streetlights flickered out by 10. Chloe's parents died in a car accident when she was 6. She barely remembered their faces. But she remembered sounds. Her mother humming over the stove, her father's laugh through the screen door. And she remembered her grandmother's voice every Sunday morning leading the Mount. Olive Baptist Church choir, like she was calling down heaven itself. Elaine wasn't wealthy. She cleaned office buildings during the week and directed the choir on Sundays. But she had one rule. Every night before bed, she and Chloe sang together. Hymns, spirituals, gospel standards. Chloe's voice grew up inside those songs. By 12, the congregation went quiet when she opened her mouth. By 15, visiting pastors from other churches were asking who that girl was. Elaine saved every spare dollar for 9 years, sold her car, skipped meals, and she got Chloe a partial scholarship to the Ridgemont Conservatory of Music, one of the most prestigious music schools in the country. The day the acceptance letter arrived, Elaine sat on the porch, held the paper in both hands, and cried without making a sound. Ridgemont was a different planet. Ivy-covered buildings, grand rehearsal halls, students who'd been in private voice lessons since age 5. Most came from money. Most were white. Chloe was one of 4 black students in the entire program. She kept her head down, studied hard, practiced late at night after everyone left, in empty rehearsal rooms where nobody could hear her. She wasn't hiding. She just didn't trust anyone enough to let them listen. Then Elaine got sick. Stage 4. Fast. She passed 3 weeks into Chloe's 2nd year on a Tuesday morning while Chloe sat in a music theory lecture 2 states away. She didn't make it home in time. After the funeral, the scholarship board reviewed her financials and reduced her aid. No family income, no cosigner, no safety net. So she took the only job the conservatory offered, night janitor. 5 nights a week, 9 to 2, mopping the same hallways she walked as a student during the day. Everyone knew. The girl with the mop. The janitor who thought she was a musician. She heard the whispers. She saw the looks. She let them pass through her, like wind through a screen door. One night, around midnight, Chloe finished mopping rehearsal hall C. The room was empty, the piano still open from an earlier class. She sat down, pulled out her grandmother's old hymnal, the same small, worn book she carried in her bag every single day, and sang, "His eye is on the sparrow," the way Elaine used to sing it. Low and aching at first, then rising, filling the empty hall like a living thing. She didn't know Professor Lorraine Davis was 2 doors down, grading papers. Professor Davis, a former opera singer who had shared stages with the best in the world, stopped mid-sentence, set down her pen, and walked into the hallway. She stood outside the rehearsal room door for the entire song. When it ended, she pressed her hand against the wall, closed her eyes, and whispered to herself, "Where has this girl been?" She didn't go in. Not that night. But she remembered. Meanwhile, Brooke Anderson moved through the conservatory like she owned it. Her annual donation funded the Anderson Star Scholarship, the most coveted award in the program. She visited campus surrounded by assistants and cameras, greeting students like fans and treating staff like furniture. Dean Harold Foster followed 2 steps behind her at all times, nodding at whatever she said, laughing at whatever she laughed at. One afternoon, Brooke walked into a rehearsal room for a photo shoot. Chloe was inside, mopping. On the piano stand sat sheet music, a complex arrangement mixing operatic structure with gospel phrasing. Brooke picked it up, flipped through it. "Whose is this?" "Mine," Chloe said quietly. Brooke looked at her, looked at the mop, looked at the music, then dropped the pages onto the wet floor. "Stick to what you know, sweetheart." She walked out, without looking back. Chloe knelt down, picked up the pages one by one, and laid them on the piano to dry. Her hands were steady. Her face showed nothing. But inside, something shifted. Something that had been patient for a very long time. 2 weeks later, the conservatory announced the Spring Showcase. It was the biggest night of the year. 5 student slots, a panel of outside judges, and the Anderson Star Scholarship as the grand prize. 1 full ride, tuition, housing, everything. For someone like Chloe, it was the difference between staying and being gone by fall. But this year was different. This year, the conservatory had invited Vivian Cole, an independent A&R executive who had launched more careers in the past decade than most labels combined. The announcement sent a charge through the student body. This wasn't just a scholarship competition anymore. This was an audition for the real world. Brooke Anderson made sure she was the one to deliver the news. She stood at the front of a campus-wide assembly. Students, faculty, staff, all packed into the main auditorium. Dean Foster sat behind her, hands folded, smiling, the careful smile of a man who knew exactly who signed his checks. "I've personally selected the 5 performers for this year's showcase," Brooke said, holding up a card. She read 4 names. Each one got polite applause. Then she stopped. She looked across the auditorium. Her eyes landed on Chloe, sitting in the last row, still in her work uniform. "And for our 5th slot," Brooke's voice softened into something sweet and sharp at the same time, "I want to give a chance to someone unexpected. Someone who works so hard for this school, just not on the stage." A pause. "Chloe Williams." The room shifted. A few students laughed. Others looked uncomfortable. Terrence Moore, sitting 3 rows ahead of Chloe, turned around. His jaw was tight. Brooke wasn't finished. "And since I believe in being fair," she continued, her smile widening, "let me make a promise. If Chloe actually impresses the judges, genuinely impresses them, I will personally fund a 2nd full scholarship." She let that hang in the air. "But if she doesn't?" She shrugged. "Well, some lessons teach themselves." Professor Davis stood up from the faculty section. Dean Foster caught her eye and shook his head slowly. She sat back down. Her hands were shaking. Chloe didn't react. She sat perfectly still, eyes forward, while 300 people stared at her like she was already the punchline to a joke that hadn't landed yet. But there was something Brooke Anderson didn't know, something nobody in that room knew. And by the time they found out, It would be far too late for Brooke to take any of it back. That night, Chloe found Terrence Moore in the basement practice room, sitting at the piano, not playing, just staring at the keys. "I'm pulling out," Chloe said. "No, you're not. She put me up there to watch me fall, in front of the whole school, in front of Vivian Cole. I won't be her joke." "Then don't be." He turned around. "She picked you because she thinks you'll crumble. What if you don't?" Chloe said nothing. 2 hours later, Professor Davis appeared during Chloe's cleaning shift. "I heard you sing," she said, "months ago, through the wall of Rehearsal Hall C. I stood outside that door for every second of it." Chloe's mop stopped moving. "I've coached voices for 30 years. Grammy winners, sopranos who filled the Met." Professor Davis stepped closer. "What you have is something I've heard maybe twice in my entire career." "Having a voice doesn't change anything," Chloe said. "Not here. Not with people like her deciding who gets to use it. It doesn't change anything until you open your mouth and make them listen." Then Professor Davis told her something she hadn't told anyone. Months ago, she had gone to Dean Foster and fought for Chloe's showcase slot. He told her to drop it or lose her tenure review. She didn't drop it. "I didn't back down for you to back down now," Professor Davis said quietly. Chloe stood in that hallway long after she left. She reached into her bag and pulled out her grandmother's hymnal, opened it to the page she knew by heart. "His eye is on the sparrow." In the margin, in Elaine's faded handwriting, "Sing like nobody can take it from you." She closed the book. She would perform. Not for Brooke's scholarship, not to prove anything. She would sing her grandmother's hymn, and she would do it for her. She found Terrence in the basement. He nodded once, sat down at the piano, and said, "Then let's build something they've never heard before." They started that night, after midnight, just piano and voice, and they told no one. The Spring Showcase semifinals took place on a Friday evening in April, inside the Ridgemont Conservatory Grand Hall. 500 seats, every one filled. Students, faculty, donors, local press, and a handful of industry people scattered through the first 3 rows. The judges sat at a long table near the front. 2 conservatory professors, 1 guest conductor, and Vivian Cole, who arrived without an entourage, took her seat and said nothing to anyone. Brooke Anderson watched from the VIP balcony, legs crossed, phone in hand, flanked by her assistant, Sandra Taylor, and 2 members of her PR team. She looked like someone waiting for entertainment she had already scripted. The first 3 performers were strong. A tenor with flawless technique, a mezzo-soprano who delivered a textbook Puccini aria, a pianist-vocalist who played and sang simultaneously with mechanical precision. The audience clapped politely after each one. Brooke nodded along like a queen approving court performances. Then the MC called the 4th name. "Chloe Williams!" A murmur rippled through the hall. Somewhere in the middle rows, a student whispered loud enough to carry, "That's the janitor girl." Backstage, Chloe stood alone. No stylist, no entourage, no vocal coach fussing over her warm-up. She wore a simple black dress, the one her grandmother had sewn by hand for her high school graduation. It wasn't designer, it wasn't new, but it fit her like armor. Terrence squeezed her hand once, then walked to the piano on stage. In the balcony, Brooke leaned toward Sandra and whispered something. Sandra glanced at her phone. A text from Brooke to Dean Foster glowed on the screen. "This will be quick. Have security ready in case she freezes." Sandra read it, then looked away. Chloe walked out. The stage lights hit her, and the hall went quiet. Not the respectful quiet that had greeted the other performers. This was the quiet of people waiting for something to go wrong. 500 faces staring at a girl in a homemade dress who mopped their floors 5 nights a week. Chloe didn't smile, didn't wave. She walked to center stage, stood still, and gave Terrence a single nod. He played the opening bars, a slow, haunting gospel intro. 4 notes, repeated, simple as a heartbeat. Then the melody shifted. Something unexpected crept in. Jazz chords. A harmonic turn that made the guest conductor tilt his head. This wasn't a standard hymn arrangement. This was something else entirely. Chloe opened her mouth. The first note came out low and warm, barely louder than a whisper, like she was singing to one person in an empty room. His eye is on the sparrow. But not the version anyone in that hall had heard before. She had taken her grandmother's hymn and rebuilt it from the inside, threading gospel roots through jazz-inflected phrasing and original melodic lines she had composed herself in those midnight basement sessions with Terrence. For the first 10 seconds, nobody moved. The sound was so intimate, so unexpected, that the audience seemed to hold its breath collectively, afraid that any movement might break whatever was happening. Then Chloe's voice began to climb. She moved from that low, aching register into her middle range, and the warmth became power. The notes didn't just carry, they pressed against the walls. The acoustics of the Grand Hall, built in 1928 for unamplified voices, caught every vibration and sent it back, amplified, layered, alive. It was the kind of sound that made the air feel heavier. The judge in seat 1, a woman who had spent 40 years evaluating voices, put down her pen. She didn't pick it up again. A student in the 3rd row covered her mouth with both hands. The girl next to her reached over and gripped her arm. Terrence added complexity on the piano, building harmonic tension underneath Chloe's voice. They moved together like 2 people who had been doing this their entire lives, not 2 weeks. Then came the shift. Without warning, without any visible effort, Chloe pivoted from gospel phrasing into a controlled operatic passage. Her voice lifted into a soprano range that had no business coming from someone who had never stood on this stage before. The notes were pure, crystalline, technically flawless, and completely unexpected. It was like watching someone pull a sword out of thin air. The guest conductor sat back in his chair. His mouth opened slightly. Professor Davis stood at the side door, arms crossed tight against her chest. Tears ran down her face. She didn't wipe them. And then Chloe did something that no one in that hall would ever forget. She brought it back. She let the operatic soprano dissolve, not into silence, but back into raw, unadorned gospel. Back to the voice her grandmother raised. Back to the sound of a girl singing on a porch in South Memphis with nothing but moonlight and memory. The transition was seamless. It was devastating. It said, I can do everything your trained voices can do, and I can do this thing that cannot be taught. The final 30 seconds were almost unbearable. Chloe held a note that seemed to stretch time itself, bending it slightly sharp, then pulling it back to center with a control that made Vivian Cole remove her glasses and lean forward until her elbows touched the table. In the balcony, Brooke Anderson's smile was gone. Her lips moved, just slightly, just for a fraction of a second, forming 2 words she didn't mean to say out loud. No way. Then she caught herself, pressed her lips together, and looked away. But Sandra Taylor saw it. And Sandra Taylor remembered. Go back and watch that moment. Brooke's face when Chloe hits the bridge. She mouths "no way" before she can stop herself. Most people miss it the first time. Chloe let the last note fade until it was barely a breath. Then silence. 2 full seconds of absolute silence. The kind of silence that only happens when 500 people forget to breathe at the same time. Then the hall broke open. The ovation started in the back row and rolled forward like a wave. Students who had laughed at the assembly were on their feet. Faculty members who had looked the other way for 2 years were standing, some of them with tears they hadn't expected. Even the press section was clapping, which press sections almost never do. Vivian Cole didn't clap. She picked up her pen and wrote one word on her notepad. Then she underlined it. Twice. The judges scored Chloe highest of the night. She advanced to the final round. Backstage, Terrence wrapped Chloe in a hug so tight he lifted her off the ground. "They heard you," he whispered. "They all heard you." Chloe pressed her face into his shoulder and let out one long, shaking breath. The first breath she felt like she'd taken in 2 years. In the balcony, the seat where Brooke Anderson had been sitting was empty. She had left without a word. Sandra noticed one thing before following her out. Brooke's hands were trembling. Something had changed, and everyone in that building could feel it. The question was no longer whether Chloe Williams could sing. The question was what Brooke Anderson was going to do about it. 48 hours before the final, things started going wrong. Chloe arrived at her assigned practice room on Wednesday afternoon and found the door locked. She went to the front desk. The receptionist, a young woman who couldn't quite meet her eyes, checked the system and said her reservation had been canceled by administration. No reason given. Chloe tried 3 other rooms, all booked. Every slot, every room for the next 2 days. She'd never had trouble reserving practice space before. Nobody had. The system was designed to have openings. Somebody had made sure there weren't any. Terrence found out the same day that the showcase finale order had been changed. Chloe had originally been assigned the 4th performance slot, the sweet spot, when the audience was warmed up and the judges were fully locked in. Now, she'd been moved to 1st. Cold audience, no momentum, no energy to ride. The change had been approved by Dean Foster's office. No explanation. Then came the microphone. During Chloe's scheduled sound check on Thursday evening, the audio engineer, a quiet, middle-aged man who had worked at Ridgemont for 15 years, told her that her assigned microphone had been reassigned to another performer due to technical limitations. She'd be using a backup unit instead. He handed it to her without looking at her face. Chloe tested it. The sound crackled. The low end dropped out. The mid-range distorted every time she pushed past mezzo forte. It wasn't a backup microphone. It was a prop designed to make her sound broken. She tested it again. Same result. She looked at the engineer. He looked at the floor. That same evening, Sandra Taylor was standing outside Brooke Anderson's dressing room when she heard Brooke's voice through the door. Sharp, businesslike, giving instructions to someone on the phone. Make sure her mic cuts out after the first verse. I want her standing up there in silence, in front of everyone, in front of that A&R woman. Let her feel what it's like to have nothing. Sandra's hand went to her pocket. She pulled out her phone, and she pressed record. She stood there for another 40 seconds, capturing every word. Her hands were shaking by the time Brooke hung up. She slipped the phone back into her pocket, stepped away from the door, and said nothing to anyone. Not yet. Thursday night, 11 p.m. The grand hall was empty and dark. Chloe sat alone on the stage floor, legs crossed, the broken microphone in front of her like a dead thing. Terrence sat beside her, back against the piano bench. "They locked every room," Chloe said. "They moved my slot. They gave me a mic that doesn't work." Her voice was steady, but her eyes were wet. "She's not trying to beat me, Terrence. She's trying to erase me." Terrence didn't argue. He just sat with it for a moment. Then he said something that changed everything. "What if we don't use a mic at all?" Chloe looked at him. "This hall," Terrence said, tapping the stage floor with his knuckle. 1928. Built for unamplified opera. Before monitors, before speakers, before any of that. The acoustics in this room were designed to carry a single human voice to every seat in the house. Chloe looked up at the vaulted ceiling, the curved stone walls, the wooden balcony that wrapped around 3 sides of the room. "Your voice," Terrence said, "without a mic, in this room? It won't just work, Chloe. It'll be devastating. No processing, no filters, nothing between you and them. Just you." Chloe sat still for a long time. The broken mic lay on the floor beside her. She picked it up, turned it over in her hands, and then set it down gently, like she was putting something to rest. "Just me," she said. Terrence nodded. "Just you." They decided that night. No microphone, no amplification, just voice and piano, the way music was performed in this hall for nearly 100 years before anyone thought to plug in a cable. Brooke Anderson had taken away Chloe's practice rooms, her time slot, and her microphone. She had tried to strip away every advantage, every tool, every safety net. She didn't realize she had just given Chloe the only weapon she actually needed, a reason to stand completely bare in front of the world and let her voice speak for itself. Word spread the way it always does in small institutions, not through announcements, but through whispers that traveled faster than any email could. By Thursday night, half the student body had heard some version of the story. The locked practice rooms, the reassigned microphone, the schedule change nobody asked for. Not all the details were right. Rumors never are. But the shape of the truth was clear enough. Someone was making sure Chloe Williams never got the chance to compete. Friday morning, the day of the finale, a cellist named Adam Wilson walked up to Chloe in the courtyard and set a key on the table. "Orchestral suite. It's mine until 6. Use it." He left before she could respond. 30 minutes later, a violinist named Grace Taylor stopped her in the hallway with a thermos of hot tea and honey. "For your throat," she said quietly. "We heard what's happening. It's not right." By noon, 3 more students had come. One brought a practice metronome. One offered to help with stage setup. One, a white senior who had been in Brooke's circle all year, walked up in the cafeteria, looked Chloe in the eye, and said, "I'm sorry. For all of it." Chloe wasn't building a movement, but a movement was building itself around her. That afternoon, Professor Davis broke protocol. She opened her personal studio and gave Chloe 2 hours for a private warm-up. If the dean found out, it would go on her record. She didn't care. At the end, Professor Davis said, "Your grandmother didn't raise you to need a microphone. She raised you to fill a room." Later, alone before the doors opened, Chloe pulled the hymnal from her bag. She opened it to "His Eye is on the Sparrow," and found the faded blue ink in the margin, Elaine's handwriting, careful and certain. "Sing like nobody can take it from you. She pressed the page to her chest and closed her eyes. When she opened them, something had settled behind her gaze. Not anger, not defiance. Something quieter. The stillness of someone who has already decided exactly who she is. She was ready. Finale night. The grand hall looked different after dark. The old chandeliers cast warm light across 800 seats, every one of them filled. Students, faculty, donors, alumni, press, and a live stream camera mounted at the back of the hall, its red light blinking steadily. Brooke Anderson had made sure of that. She wanted the whole world watching. She arrived like a headline. Entourage first, then cameras, then Brooke herself. White dress, diamond earrings, smile rehearsed to the millimeter. She stopped in the lobby for photos, shook hands with donors, kissed cheeks she didn't care about. Every move was choreographed. Every angle was covered. Backstage, Chloe was lacing her shoes. Brooke found her there. She didn't knock. She walked in with two members of her PR team and stood over Chloe like she was inspecting something she'd already discarded. No hard feelings after tonight, okay? Brooke's voice was loud enough for everyone in the hallway to hear. Not everyone is built for this stage. Some people are meant to stay behind the scenes. Support roles. Cleaning roles. She smiled. You know what I mean. She patted Chloe's shoulder, the way you'd pat a stray dog you didn't intend to feed. Cameras flashed behind her. She'd made sure they would. Chloe didn't look up. She finished lacing her shoes, stood, and smoothed the front of her grandmother's black dress. She said nothing. Brooke waited for a reaction, a flinch, a tear, a trembling lip. Anything she could carry back to the balcony like a trophy. She got nothing. 20 minutes before showtime, Brooke took the stage to address the audience. She gave a speech about giving back and equal opportunity, words she wore like a borrowed coat that didn't quite fit. She announced that tonight's performances would be live-streamed for the first time in the showcase's history to share these incredible young voices with the world. The audience applauded. They didn't know the real reason. Brooke wanted Chloe's failure broadcast to as many screens as possible. She wanted it permanent. She wanted it everywhere. Dean Foster followed her to the podium. He introduced the judges. But when he reached Vivian Cole's name, he skipped her full title. No mention of the labels she'd built. No mention of the careers she'd launched. Just Vivian Cole, industry guest. It was a small thing, a careful thing. But Vivian noticed. She always noticed. Then Foster announced a last-minute format change. After each performance, there would now be a brief Q&A with the judges to assess artistic depth and intention. This had not been in the original rules. It had not been discussed with the faculty. It was added 48 hours ago at Brooke's suggestion, designed to do one thing: expose Chloe's lack of formal pedigree in front of 800 people and a live stream audience that showed no signs of slowing down. Professor Davis, standing in the wings, heard the announcement and closed her eyes. She understood exactly what it was. The pressure was total. First slot, no microphone, rigged Q&A, live stream rolling, 800 in the hall. The counter on the screen behind the sound booth already showed 15,000 viewers online, climbing by the second. Chloe stood in the wings, watching the stage through a gap in the curtain. She could see the balcony where Brooke had taken her seat. She could see the judges' table. She could see the red light of the camera, steady as a heartbeat. Brooke leaned over the balcony railing and caught Chloe's eye. She held the gaze for a long moment, then mouthed 4 words, slow and deliberate. "This is my house." Chloe held her gaze right back. She didn't mouth anything. She didn't have to. The look on her face said everything. Calm, settled, immovable. The look of someone who had already survived worse than anything this woman could ever do to her. Terrence appeared beside her. "You good?" "I'm good." No mic, no safety net, just you and me. Just you and me. He walked to the piano. Chloe waited in the wings. The MC called her name. The audience offered thin, uncertain applause, the polite, hollow sound of people who had already decided what was going to happen. Every single one of them was wrong. While the audience settled and the live stream counter ticked past 20,000, things were moving behind the curtain that Chloe knew nothing about. Sandra Taylor stood in the corridor behind the stage, clutching her phone like a grenade with the pin half pulled. She had carried Brooke's recorded voice in her pocket for 48 hours. Every word of that phone call, every instruction to sabotage the microphone, every syllable dripping with the casual cruelty of someone who had never once faced a consequence. Sandra had worked for Brooke for 3 years. She had fetched coffee at 4 a.m., rebooked flights at midnight, smiled through insults disguised as jokes, and swallowed every humiliation with a, "Yes, of course," that tasted like rust. She told herself it was the industry. She told herself it was temporary. She told herself a lot of things. But listening to Brooke order the destruction of a 22-year-old girl's only chance, that was the line. And she had crossed it the moment she pressed record. She found Professor Davis in the faculty hallway and held out the phone without introduction. Pressed play. Brooke's voice filled the space between them, clear, commanding, unmistakable. Professor Davis listened without moving. When it ended, she looked at Sandra. "You recorded this yourself?" "Yes." "You understand what happens if this comes out?" "I understand what happens if it doesn't." Professor Davis nodded once. "Hold on to it. When the time comes, you'll know." Sandra slipped the phone into her pocket and disappeared into the crowd. On the other side of the building, Vivian Cole was conducting her own quiet investigation. She had noticed the microphone situation during Thursday's sound check. A performer given a backup unit that crackled like tinfoil, while 4 superior mics sat unused. She pulled the audio engineer aside and asked one question. "Who authorized the reassignment?" The engineer shifted his weight. "It came from above." Vivian didn't push. She wrote 2 words in her notebook, closed it, and walked back to her seat. She had seen enough corruption in this industry to recognize its fingerprints. She would wait. But she was watching everything. Backstage, Terrence Moore was moving fast, 20 minutes before curtain. He found Adam Wilson, the cellist, first, then Grace Taylor, the violinist, then a bassist, a flutist, and a percussionist, all students who had come to Chloe's side that morning. He pulled them into a storage room behind the stage and closed the door. "I need a yes or no in 30 seconds, he said. "Chloe's going out there with no mic, just voice and piano. I want to build something around her. Acoustic, unplugged, completely live. No rehearsal. You follow her voice. She leads, you follow." He handed out a chord chart, 1 page, handwritten, ink still fresh. "This is her grandmother's hymn. She rearranged it herself. Gospel, jazz, opera. It shifts between all 3. Don't try to predict it. Just listen to where she's going and meet her there." 5 musicians looked at the chart. 5 musicians looked at each other. 5 said yes. Nobody told Chloe. At 7:58, 2 minutes before the doors closed, an older black man in a gray suit walked into the grand hall and took a seat in the last row. He carried a weathered trumpet case, leather cracked and darkened with decades of use. He set it under his chair, folded his hands in his lap, and looked at the stage with the quiet patience of someone who had waited for this night for a very long time. Professor Davis spotted him from the wings and nearly dropped her program. Russell Brown, Chloe's grandfather's closest friend, a man who had played trumpet alongside jazz legends in the 1980s, a man who had sat a 5-year-old girl on his knee and taught her to match pitch before she could tie her shoes. He hadn't come to perform, he had come to witness, but he brought his trumpet, just in case. The house lights dimmed. The hall fell silent. The live stream counter passed 40,000. Everything was in place. The recording, the musicians, the witness, the evidence, the truth. Chloe stood in the wings, alone, knowing none of it. All she had was a voice, a piano player, and a promise she'd made to a woman who wasn't here anymore. It had always been enough. Chloe walked to center stage. No mic stand, no monitor, no safety net. Just a girl in a black dress her grandmother made, standing under a single spotlight in a hall built nearly 100 years before she was born. She nodded to Terrence. He played the opening bars, the same haunting gospel intro from the semifinals. Then something changed. Adam Wilson walked on stage with his cello and began to play. A low drone beneath the piano that vibrated through the floorboards. Grace Taylor appeared from the opposite wing with her violin, adding a high, aching counter-melody. Then the bassist, the flutist, the percussionist. One by one, student musicians walked onto the stage and joined in. No sheet music, no conductor, just the chord chart in their heads and one instruction: follow her voice. Chloe watched them come. Her eyes glistened. She took one breath and opened her mouth. No microphone. Nothing between her voice and 800 people but the air itself. Her voice moved through the 1928 acoustics the way water moves through a canyon, finding every surface and filling it completely. She started with gospel, pure and aching, then shifted into jazz phrasing that made the guest conductor grip both armrests. Then, without warning, she lifted into full operatic soprano. The sound was enormous. It rose to the vaulted ceiling and came back layered and luminous, as if the building itself had become her instrument. No microphone could have done what that hall did for her voice. Every sabotage had led her here, to a stage stripped bare, where nothing stood between talent and truth. Vivian Cole stood up at the judges' table. She didn't sit back down. In the balcony, Brooke Anderson sat frozen, face pale, lips white. In the last row, Russell Brown opened his trumpet case, stood, and played a soaring counter-melody for the final 8 bars, the same riff Chloe's grandfather used to play on their porch in Memphis. Chloe's eyes found him across 800 people. Her voice broke, not from weakness, but from recognition. She recovered in half a breath and finished with tears streaming. 3 seconds of absolute silence. Then the hall shattered. Standing ovation, live stream chat flooding, viewer count past 150,000 and climbing. The Q&A was supposed to be the trap. Dean Foster leaned forward. "Chloe, can you tell us about your formal training?" Chloe didn't hesitate. "I've trained since I was 5. My grandmother directed a choir for 26 years. Russell Brown taught me pitch before I could tie my shoes. Professor Davis has coached me for 2 years. I've logged over 10,000 hours practicing in the halls I mopped every night. She paused. I can discuss bel canto technique, modal interchange in gospel harmony, and extended vocal range methodology. Would you like me to continue? Silence. The trap collapsed. After all performances finished, Vivian Cole stood. Before we announce results, I need to raise a concern about the integrity of this competition. She turned to the wings. Professor Davis? Professor Davis walked out, took the microphone, and said, "What I'm about to play was recorded 2 days ago by a witness." She nodded to the sound engineer. Brooke Anderson's voice filled the grand hall. Every speaker, every corner, every seat. Make sure her mic cuts out after the first verse. I want her standing up there in silence. Let her feel what it's like to have nothing. Watch this moment again. Not Brooke. Watch Dean Foster. His right hand moves toward his pocket, reaching for his phone. He's not shocked. He's trying to call someone. Because he was part of it. Go back and look. Brooke stood in the balcony. That's taken out of context. Then Sandra Taylor stood up in the audience. My name is Sandra Taylor. I was Brooke Anderson's assistant for 3 years. I recorded that call. And I have texts between Brooke and Dean Foster coordinating the lockout of Chloe's practice rooms, her mic reassignment, and the schedule change. She read one message aloud. Brooke's words to Dean Foster, Wednesday, 11:14 p.m. Make sure she has nothing, no room, no mic, no chance. A slow clap started in the student section, spreading row by row until it became a wave aimed at the girl in the black dress still standing on stage, looking out at a room that had finally seen everything. The live stream exploded. Within minutes, the hashtag formed. Hashtag Justice for Chloe. It would trend for 3 days. The aftermath came fast. Vivian Cole didn't wait for the noise to settle. She stood at the judges' table, raised one hand, and the hall went quiet. The kind of quiet that comes not from authority, but from the understanding that whatever this woman was about to say would change everything.
The integrity of this competition has been compromised, she said. The evidence speaks for itself. However, the performances were legitimate. Every artist earned their moment. The judges scored independently, without consultation, without influence. She paused. Let the silence do its work. Chloe Williams is the unanimous winner of the Spring Showcase. The hall erupted, but differently this time. Not shock, not scandal. Something warmer, something earned. 800 people applauding not because they had witnessed drama, but because they had witnessed justice. Vivian wasn't finished. I came here looking for one thing. Talent I couldn't walk away from. Talent that would keep me up at night if I didn't act. She picked up her notepad and held it so the front row could see. One word, written during the semifinals, underlined 4 times now. Star. On behalf of Cole Records, I am offering Chloe Williams a full artist development deal. Not a scholarship, a professional contract. Because what I heard tonight doesn't belong in a classroom. It belongs in the world. Chloe stood on the stage, tears running but her chin level. Terrence, still at the piano, dropped his head and pressed his fist against his mouth. Professor Davis, standing in the wings, leaned against the wall and let herself cry openly for the first time in 30 years. In the balcony, Brooke Anderson was already gone. She had slipped out during Sandra's testimony, head down,
PR team scrambling behind her. But the live stream had captured everything, every word, every reaction, every second of her face when the recording played. By midnight, the clip was everywhere. Entertainment sites ran it as their lead story. Social media dissected every frame. Hashtag Justice for Chloe trended nationally, then internationally. By morning, 12 million views. Brooks' label issued a statement before noon. "We are reevaluating our partnership in light of new information." Within 72 hours, the partnership was terminated. Her advisory board position at Ridgemont was revoked. The Anderson Starr Scholarship Fund was transferred to an independent committee, permanently removed from her control. 3 years of carefully constructed influence, dismantled in a single weekend by a recording on an assistant's phone and a girl who refused to stop singing. Dean Foster's reckoning came slower, but just as hard. The Board of Trustees launched a formal investigation based on Sandra's texts, detailed, time-stamped, devastating. A paper trail of complicity that stretched back months. Foster was placed on administrative leave within the week. He resigned 6 weeks later, quietly, without a public statement. His replacement instituted blind auditions and an independent oversight committee for all scholarship decisions. The system Brooke and Foster had built together was taken apart, piece by piece. Professor Davis was offered the interim dean position. She declined, said she'd rather keep teaching, the one thing she had sacrificed everything to protect. The board awarded her tenure with distinction and gave her control of a new mentorship program for underrepresented students at Ridgemont. She accepted that. Sandra Taylor left Brooks' employment the morning after the showcase. No 2 weeks' notice, no resignation letter. She simply didn't show up. 2 months later, Vivian Cole hired her as a junior A&R coordinator at Cole Records. When a reporter asked why she had come forward, Sandra said 5 words: "I was tired of silence." 3 days after the showcase, Chloe sat on a bench outside the Grand Hall with Russell Brown. The campus was quiet. The cameras were gone. The hashtags had faded from the trending page. Russell held his trumpet case on his lap and looked at the evening sky. "Your granddad would have stood on his chair," he said. Chloe laughed. A real, full laugh. The first one that hadn't felt borrowed in a very long time. Then she pressed her face into his shoulder and cried the way she hadn't cried since Elaine's funeral. Not from sadness, from the overwhelming, disorienting relief of being seen, fully, completely seen, by people who understood exactly what it had cost her to stand on that stage. Russell put his arm around her and said nothing. Some moments don't need words. They just need someone to be there. 6 months later, Chloe Williams stood backstage at the Meridian Theater. Sold out. 5,000 seats, every one filled. Her debut showcase under Cole Records. No cleaning uniform, no mop, no side door. But she hadn't forgotten. Before she walked out, she pinned something inside her jacket, right over her heart. A single page from a worn hymnal. Faded blue ink in the margin. Her grandmother's handwriting. "Sing like nobody can take it from you." The stage was simple. A grand piano. A single spotlight. No auto-tune, no backing tracks. When the lights came up, Chloe stood center stage, and for one brief moment, she saw the grand hall again. The mop in her hand, Brooke pointing, 300 people laughing. Then she opened her mouth and sang. 2 months after her debut, Chloe established the Elaine Williams Fund, covering tuition for working students at 3 conservatories. The first recipient was a 19-year-old who worked nights in a hospital cafeteria and practiced piano in the chapel during breaks. Chloe met her on orientation day, looked at the calluses on her hands, and said, "You remind me of someone." The girl, told to stick to cleaning floors, was now making sure no one else had to choose between their talent and their survival. If you were in Chloe's shoes, sabotaged mic, rigged competition, every door locked, whole world watching, would you still have walked out there? Drop your answer in the comments. And go back to the moment the recording plays. Watch Dean Foster's right hand. He reaches for his phone. Most people miss it the first time. If this hits you, leave a like, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe. More stories coming where the underdog rewrites the whole game. See you in the next one. Yo, like. Talent doesn't need permission. Period. Nah, for real. Nobody gets to decide your worth but you. The ones who try to dim your light, they already know you shine brighter. So stay loud, stay real, stay you. That's the whole lesson right there. Yeah. Yo, like, talent doesn't need permission. Period. Nah, for real. Nobody gets to decide your worth but you. The ones who try to dim your light, they already know you shine brighter. So stay loud, stay real, stay you. That's the whole lesson right there. Yeah.